The Robie House, Chicago by Frank Lloyd Wright. In my last slideshow I mentioned that the architects of the Dutch Stijl movement had been influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright. Now I want to look at an example of the houses Wright was designing at the time to show more clearly what I mean. In the period before the First World War, Wright was designing what became known as prairie houses. These were nothing like the little house on the prairie, but innovative designs unlike anything else that was being designed at the time. We will look at one of the best examples of this style, the Robie House in Hyde Park, Chicago, built between 1908 and 1910 for Frederick C. Robie, a bicycle and auto parts supplier. The main material is brick, and the design is relentlessly horizontal, with the strong lines of the roofs being a dominant feature. Even the horizontal joints on the brickwork were raked, while the vertical joints had mortar coloured to blend in with the bricks. This celebrates the flat horizons of the American Midwest where Wright had grown up. Attics and basements were removed, and he described the house as married to the ground. The walls are stopped at second-story level for a continuous band of windows for the bedrooms, sheltered by broad eaves. It is noticeable that there is no front door on the main facade. Wright intended finding your way inside to be an act of discovery. The entrance is tucked away around the back. The main door leads into a small lobby with a conspicuously low ceiling. The playroom and billiard room are at this level. Stairs lead up to the first floor, and this is where you really enter the building as you break out from the confines of the stairway into the fluid space that is the living area. The living and dining areas and the study all flow into one space, broken only by a fireplace sunk low into the floor. Fireplaces were important to Wright. He considered that they should be the defining, unifying centre of the house, as in this example from his own house. He insisted on bringing ceilings and doors down to human height, a reaction to the high ceilings of Victorian houses. Treat the wall as a screen, he declared, not the side of a box, freeing space, not confining it. Turn the living areas into a single open space, where functions flow into each other with minimal demarcation, again echoing the sweeping space of the prairie. No more boxes inside boxes called rooms. Allow spaces to swing round the central hearth or project out into the landscape. Simplify rather than elaborate. Make the plan and the setting come together as an organic, natural whole. Today we would call this open plan, and it is now considered the norm for bespoke designs of new houses. But in those days it was revolutionary. This was the feature that particularly influenced Rietveld in his Schroeder house in Utrecht. Here he took open plan to its extreme, with movable partitions for the first floor walls, and using glass to make the inside and outside of the building blend into one another as much as possible. But the flat roofs and the interlocking volumes of Wright's houses clearly also influenced Rietveld, even if the building he produced was, at first glance, very different from the Robie house. The remainder of the first floor of the Robie house was taken up with the kitchen, servants' quarters and guest rooms. Upstairs again were the main bedrooms under the roof's sweeping overhang. The garage was a novel feature of the house, as car ownership was not the norm in those days. Robie only lived in the house for 2 years before both his marriage and his business collapsed. The building became a seminary, and when it had outlived its usefulness in the 1950s, it was planned to tear it down. Wright was personally involved in the fight to save it, saying that it was unwise to trust anything spiritual to the clergy. Now the house is owned by the University of Chicago and is managed by the Frank Lloyd Wright Preservation Trust, who have restored the house to its original state. It is part of the 20th century architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright World Heritage Site.